Hi, everyone. This is Sebastian Traeger, Managing Director of Reliability Center, and welcome back to another episode of Reliability 4.0. As always, we're on a mission to make the world a more reliable place. And today I'm thrilled to be joined by Jeremie Lieb. He's the Transformation Manager of Reliability at Worthington Steel. He comes to us from Columbus, Ohio. Jeremie, it is great to have you.
Hey, Sebastian, I'm really excited to be here. Anything we can talk about reliability and how we're being proactive in the skilled trades, I'm all about. So let's do it.
Excellent. Great. Well, as we dive in, you're from Columbus, Ohio, the Ohio State University. My grandfather was actually a Buckeye, so I've got a
All
soft spot in
right.
my heart. What is something you love about Columbus for folks who might have a chance to visit?
One of the coolest things I think about our town that it probably goes under the radar is we have amazing pizza here. A
Huh.
lot of different mom and pop shops. So I have yet to go through all of them. I've moved across the country, and one thing that I will say, you can get just about any kind of slice of pie you want here in Columbus, Ohio. So if you're ever in the town, grab some of our
Good.
local pizza. It's pretty good.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I'm gonna remember that. I've only been there once, but I'd love to get back again.
Okay.
Let's dive into your work. I know you're at Worthington Steel. Tell us a little bit about your role there and the company.
Sure. So Worthington Steel, we're a steel processor. So we don't manufacture steel, but we process it. So we take the big master coils and do value added exercises to those different products. So whether it's annealing, slitting, temper pass, pickling, galvanizing, we do a lot of those different things. So been in business over 75 years now.
Hmm.
Excited to be a part of that. I've been with the company for 30. So in this role
Great.
for the past 8. So been really focused on the skilled trades probably about 25 years of my career with Worthington. Like I said, in the past 8, been focused on proactivity and maintenance and how we're trying to make our skilled trades groups better.
Excellent. Okay. I know some of that you shared about at a conference that you recently spoke at. Why don't you share for folks what it is you talked on and what that topic was?
Yeah, sure. So here recently, NFPA 70B came out, which was functional requirements around reliability and electrical distribution systems. So I wrote a program for Worthington Steel that did a risk assessment over those components and then how we were going to make sure that they were compliant within our 70B model and our program that we wrote. So I did that with our electrical safety compliance officer, Brian Gard. He spoke at the conference with me. Great individual, great companion, great person I've learned from over my career. So we were able to go down there and talk about a lot of the different criteria that went into that assessment and how to take a look at a one-line drawing and how we trained our groups to think a little bit different. When you think about power distribution systems, not a lot of people think about them until they go wrong, right? Until you're not having power, or until you're having a brownout, or until you're having, a functional failure, large power outage. So those are some of the things that we've tried to help our group understand when we go through a one-line drawing. How do we look at the different aspects of what assets are in there and what the risk is around that? So we had some established criteria. And then as we looked at that, how do we pull our 70B aspect into that to where we could automate that to where they didn't have to do the risks? So we took a look at the criteria of what was a category 1, category 2, category 3 type thing with the 70B aspect. And then how does that play out to our fuses, our switchgear, our oil transformers, whatever we're looking at. That way we have a reliability plan going forward and we're staying compliant within the NFPA 70B guidelines that are mandatory now as of 2013.
Okay. Can you walk us through? I mean, I love that topic. I love the high level. Can you walk folks through an example of what that might look like in practice?
One of the first things that we do when we start talking about that analysis is we take a look at some of the asset replacement value and what that means, whether we're talking about a $200 set of fuses or we're talking about a $200,000 transformer. You're going to have a different reliability strategy around all of those, and what our spares look like, some of what our condition monitoring strategy is. Are we doing thermography? Are we doing tribology on our oil field transformers, some of those other things? So a lot of the aspects of those things were kind of inherent, but we didn't have standardization around a lot of that within our programs. So Brian had done a really good job throughout the last 15, 20 years of pushing a lot of these efforts when it came to electrical safety and electrical safety compliance. Then when we added the reliability layer on top of it, we were able to buy in a lot. So when we get done with doing one of those assessments, what we're able to do is take a deck to our senior leadership team and say, here's the risk profile for our electrical distribution systems. And it's not just going to be held on the maintenance manager anymore. We're all going to make this business decision together, and we're going to work together to be able to under that and coordinate those efforts, and everybody can cooperate together.
That's great. And so what have the results of some of that been?
It's a big task. I'll tell you that right now. So one of the things, we talk about our facilities and some of the incoming power. There's a lot of different scope from some very, what I would call small to medium grade incoming power to some very large. So we've had to try to adjust our strategy per facility to try to understand this. We've had probably, I'm going to say 5 of my 12 core facilities that I really worry about that have completed that exercise. We have a lot of them that are underway, but they are also very in-depth. They're very large when we start talking about this asset structure and the hierarchy around that. So being able to dive into that and giving those guys support. I know these guys, a lot of times they have a day job that they have to do as well,
Right.
when they're doing a lot of the things out there on the floor. So how do I best support them? So a lot of that comes down to how do we collaborate together and how do we get this thing across the goal line?
It's good. So related to this, or just even your broader job, like what are some of the KPIs or goals that you set as an organization and just in your role to kind of motivate
Yeah.
and hold people accountable?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ones that we look at, whether, it's from SMRP. There's some of the ones that we talk about internally, like schedule compliance around planned work is one of the big ones that I'm looking for right now. I'm not, I really like to focus on our PM follow-ups is another big KPI that I like to push. It's all fine and good. I always tell my wife, if you take your car to Toyota and they say everything's fine, and then, the transmission falls out of it 30 miles down the road, you're going to have an issue with that. So how do I incentivize our people to start thinking that way, to try to find those things before they fail? How are we leveraging some of our condition monitoring platforms? How are we leveraging precision work, precision commissioning, and things like that? So that's a lot of what my job has been, I think, is to try to drive that culture and to drive that change. I always say that if your maintenance strategy is to get to 3 o'clock or the end of the shift, you really don't have a maintenance strategy. So that's one of the things that I always try to say, where are we looking? What do we want to get done this week? What do we want to get done this month? What are we going to get done this quarter? And then how do we look at being creative or trying to drive capital in some of those situations to make sure we're being the best stewards of our money, trying to change that culture from within rather than just throw money at a problem sometimes. That's another thing that I like to try to be proud of, is how do we engage our people? Because that's what it comes down to at Worthington. We're people first, treat people like you'd want to be treated. And I'm living, walking, talking proof of that. I've been here 30 years. I never thought I would be in a single career that long in my life. But every time I've raised my hand, we've been given an opportunity. And that's what I did with our liability. As a maintenance guy, and having one of the lines that I always say to my groups is, I've done it wrong so long, I thought it was right. And that's where I've had to change my outlook and change the perspective of how I go about things, just so I can sit here and be up in front of a group and say, hey, I'm the first one to admit that I failed in how I approach some of these problems sometimes. So I think that's a big thing for them to hear it coming right from my mouth. And then how do we practically apply that to our problems, and how do we start reducing some of those biggest hitters and some of the things that might be eating our lunch out there in the processes and on the production floor.
That's good. I do want to touch back on people, but before that, you also mentioned that you're kind of in a role of really thinking proactively. Was that in place before you arrived, or has that been in the culture there, or is that something you had to bring? And if you brought it, what were some of the things you did to get people to think differently?
There's been, I can think of several people that I worked with ahead of me in my career, Pat McGee, Richard Colby, a couple of these guys that kind of really brought me up into the reliability realm of things. So we always kind of had a role, whether it was informally with an ops manager or whether it was somebody in L&D, but we never had anybody within our transformation group. And when I came into this role, it was probably a new step. I thought I was going to be in this role 18 to 24 months. And, here it is almost 9 years later, and we're still getting a lot of bang for the buck. And there's still a lot of work to be done when it comes to reliability and how we're changing our culture. So I think when you look at it that way, there's been some predecessors and there's been some stuff that I've taken from 20 years ago and then maybe revitalized it. Some of the maintenance assessments and some of the other things like that, where I can go back and take a look at what our traditional patterns were, where our culture was at, and I can see growth, or I can see how things have degraded over time as well. So just having those honest talks with our managers, with our reliability engineers, with our ops managers, how are we driving that? How are we getting better? Yeah, I felt like I'm kind of the keeper of the flame of that. So it's been pretty cool.
That's great. Yeah, that's so. And you mentioned just being a people first organization, and you seem very personable. How, like, just if you're providing just tips or thoughts to other folks, how often are you like really talking to people? I mean, like, how in person are you versus how much are you using technology to communicate? How does that all work?
I think you got to be able to use every tool in your bag really nowadays, especially when with having AI and some of the agents that I built has been able to help me streamline some of those processes to help drive some of that to the groups. So when we just had a global roundtable a few weeks ago, and I was able to help use AI to help me to drive my presentation. I didn't have to have it ready weeks in advance. I was able to do it in 45 minutes. So that was a nice thing. Yeah, when we start talking about the people, for me, that's the biggest thing. I've been blessed, like I said, to have a lot of good mentors, a lot of good crewmates, a lot of good teammates across my career. I can think of hundreds of them that I check up on, that I like to make sure everything's going well, not just in their work lives, but in their personal lives, because we spent that much time together. And then having to, go across, I moved my family 3 times across America to try to help drive some of this. And that's where I said a lot of those mistakes came from, that I learned in the long run to how to get better. So when we start talking about leveraging all the different technologies, I do a lot of site visits. I'm usually at some site every week. So that usually puts me on the road a couple of nights a week. But then, we do a lot of calls, check-ins. Sometimes it's just about getting stuff off our chests and try to talk about best practices rather than holding people accountable for those failures. Let's talk about we can't change that. That's already happened. It's already in the past. So how do I enable you to get to where you need to be today, or challenge you to what we need to be thinking about tomorrow to get you to where we need to go to help make sure our process is going to be more reliable?
It's great. You mentioned AI, and so I'm curious because you mentioned having agents. And for those who don't know, maybe just explain briefly what an agent is. And then I'm really curious how using an agent, people kind of go together in your mind.
Oh, wow. That's a loaded question right there. So with AI and agents, a lot of it is criteria that I build into that thought partner, as I like to say. AI is what I truly think of that as a thought partner, and how I might be able to define a strategy or challenge me or debate me on something. I use it a lot to debate me. I was just working on a presentation before we hopped on this call around how to drive some additional resources for condition monitoring. So how do I utilize that? And then having the AI push back on me and say, hey, this is what your senior leadership team is going to be thinking, or here's where your data might be slack in some aspects of those things. So how do you drive that? Well, that just helps me be more prepared when I go into those conversations. And I feel extremely comfortable about talking to those things, because I kind of feel like I've already been able to balance out all the what ifs and whatnots that I didn't see coming. So when you start talking about doing that with our people, that's one of the things that I've really started to do is, our people, like I said, we're changing our strategy, and we're changing our culture, and we're changing some of the definitions of what reliability means. So leveraging AI in that, and being able to utilize our guys to take give me a FMEA on a hydraulic cylinder, for instance, and then how do I take that hydraulic cylinder FMEA and apply it to some of our checklists that we have in our system. Those are great tools to be able to teach that. And that's one of the things in the past 60, 90 days, I've been spending a lot of time with our planners and our informal leaders, our crew leads, our maintenance managers, just to be able to get them to explore that technology. And then they're coming back to me with stuff. And I think that's the best thing. I want to get that technology. I want to get that information to the boots on the ground. That way they're the best ones to utilize it, because that's where the money's made. So how do I enable that, and how do I challenge those guys to do those things, and how do I reward them and cite them for the good work that they're doing? So I take that as a huge personal responsibility.
Yeah, that's
great. The technology is a great thing, but it always comes back to the people, and how do I enable them to get better?
It's good. One other thing I wanted to touch on. So our company, of course, does root cause analysis. That's kind of what we do, both in terms of the software side and the training side. What do you all do? I'm curious for root cause analysis, and how important is that at Worthington Steel?
Yeah, and we've gone through some various generations of our transformation group. A lot of that is around problem solving and building that. One of the things that's been really imperative here lately is we've done a lot of work around Kanban and flow to make sure we're right sizing our inventories and how we're pushing our material through the plants. It was easy in years past to have coil fields full of coils, but the capital that goes into keeping all that steel there is substantial. So how do we trim some of that to make sure we're running our business the best way we can? So is what happens as soon as you start to be able to reduce some of those inventories, now all of a sudden maintenance and reliability becomes a way more important focus to our process, because if we have downtime, it's going to greatly hamper what we're shipping. It's going to greatly hamper how that flow through the facility moves. So when we start talking about our transformational efforts and how some of those things have developed, one of the things that I was, really happy is we've been working on this for 8 years, and I feel like we're in a good spot to where we can help enable our guys to think that way. We just got to make sure we have the executive sponsorship and are driving a lot of the same things, talking the same reasons, having the same definitions. So doing a lot of training on that, on the maintenance, on the management side of things, and on the strategy side of things right now, and maybe not as much on the. We still do technical training, obviously, but diving into some new pools for some talent.
That's good. Well, good stuff. Well, Jeremie, this has been great talking to you. I always like to ask folks, kind of as we're wrapping up, just for one thing, that if you could rewind, and I love that you've been at Worthington Steel for 30 years, because like really the question is, hey, if you could go back and tell yourself, but 30 years earlier, hey, here's what I think you should focus on. Here's some things to keep in mind. What do you think you would have said, or what would you say today to that person?
I would say being the best firefighter is not a career strategy. You know, I was very good at that, and I made a lot of headwinds, man. I enjoyed having that ego of being able to fix anything out there on that production floor. But man, was it flawed when I think about the long-term scale, and when we start talking about the people and being in a proactive culture and a reactive culture. Man, I hate the safety factors. I hate the things that we do in that reactive world that are just so counterintuitive to what we talk about of, you know, being a golden rule company and treating people like you want to be treated. That is not an operational strategy I ever want to be a part of again. So when I think back, you know, 25 years ago, and when I first came out of Columbus State Community College with my electromechanical engineering degree, thinking I could fix anything on earth, probably wanted to have a little bit more structure and a little bit more focus on that, on how we're going to be proactive versus than just maybe slapping band-aids on stuff sometimes. So
that's good.
Yeah,
that's great. Well, that's I love the focus on being proactive. I think that's always a good encouragement. Well,
absolutely.
Well, Jeremie, it's been great talking to you. Really appreciate the time and learning more about what you guys do. I'm excited. I'm hoping you're going to be back at IMC next year. I'd love to. I don't know if you'll be giving a talk, but at minimum, it'd be great to hear you if you are in person. And I'd encourage all listeners, again, to check him out. So, Jeremie, again, thank you so much. And really, anybody out here, our goal in this podcast is to help listeners and engineers just take steps closer to being more proactive and thinking a little bit better about how to be innovative with technology and solving problems. If you're specifically looking for anything related to RCA, check out reliability.com for training materials or resources. And if you want to dig deeper with software, check out our Easy RCA product. Again, thank you all for the time. We appreciate it. And we hope you've been able to benefit from this as we join together in making the world a more reliable place. We'll see you on the next episode.